This meeting is for 1 hour and 30 minutes. Ron D will be sharing on another way to look at the traditions for 60 minutes, followed by a 20-minute Q&A. Ron, thank you for your service and your willingness to share your life with us today for the third time. We love and appreciate you. Please help me give a warm welcome to Ron D from Lincoln, California. His home group is the Rocklin Men's Stag. Welcome, Ron, and over to you.
Thank you, Mel. I appreciate it. And Tamara, thank you for asking me again. It's good to be invited somewhere. It's even better to be invited back because that was not always the case in my life. I don't know about yours. When Tamara asked me to do this, she had heard me somewhere talk about traditions. And when she called to do this one, she said, I want you to go through the traditions. And we were talking and I was trying to think, how can I make the traditions interesting? Because when I first got sober, like Raza read the traditions tonight, I thought in the area where I got sober, meetings were an hour and a half like this one. And I thought they read the traditions just because they had to fill up 5 or 10 minutes. And so they read the traditions. They meant absolutely nothing to me. That went on for a long time. Since then, it's changed because I got deeper into the traditions. I started to find out about the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. I started to find out why the traditions were so important. I started to look at them differently. Later in sobriety, and I'll talk about this tonight, later on in sobriety, I was at a conference and I heard a couple talk about how to apply the traditions and the concepts, because we do have 36 principles in this program, how to apply the traditions and the concepts in their home lives and in their work lives. And I thought, boy, that's great. And it took the traditions to another level for me. So that's what I hope I'm able to impart. Second thing I hope I'm able to impart is some hunger on the folks that are here to maybe look at the traditions at a different level. And the start for me was learning, because I heard this early on, and I think we've all heard the same thing. You know, for AA to survive, the traditions have to be followed. You know, I see Lisa shaking her head. Yeah, I heard the same thing. You know, but I thought, yeah, right, sure, they're trying to get my dollar in the basket every day. You know, how important are they really? And when I started to really get into the history of Alcoholics Anonymous and alcoholism, I found out some things about why we have the traditions. Before the advent of the traditions, Alcoholics Anonymous came into being in 1935. By the way, I'll give you a quick little history thing. I just found this out this week. I didn't know it. But a couple of days, what's today? The 16th, right? 4 days ago. I don't know if you guys know what happened 4 days ago, 88 years ago. But on May 12th, 1935, that was Mother's Day, 1935. And that was the first meeting between Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob. So that has nothing to do with traditions. It's just there. The other thing that has nothing to do with traditions, but it has to do with your group. And one of the things I like about speaking at your group is the amount of people with service commitments. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. My sobriety date is September 21st of 1976. So over 46 and a half years ago. I came here. I'm at my third meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm sitting with a guy that had made a 12-step call on me 2 years earlier. And when he showed up at the house, I'm half drunk. My wife had called him, and he comes into the apartment, and we're talking, and I threw him out of the house. I said, look, Jim, I said, if I ever get as sick as you, you'll see me at Alcoholics Anonymous. But for now, just get out of here, man. I'm not interested in what you're selling. And he left. So 2 years earlier, I'm at my second or third meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Never forget this till the day I die. I walk up this long row of steps, come to the front door of the meeting, and there's this guy, Jim. And he looks at me and I look at him and he starts laughing out loud, but not just laugh. He's laughing like a hyena. I mean, he's absolutely hysterical. He says, I remember you, Ron. He says, you're the guy who threw me out, said you wouldn't see me until you were as sick as me. I guess you are. Come on in, man. And he has me sit down at this table. It was a speaker meeting, Saturday night speaker meeting. He has me sit down at this table, and it was a lot of couples. A lot of guys took their wives there, and I sat there. And he comes and he sits down, and he says to me, he says, how you doing? I said, I am really doing good, Jim. I said, I've been on the wagon for 3 days, man, and I am really doing well. And he said, have you ever thought about this, Ron? If you're on something and it starts shaking like that, it's pretty easy to fall off. He said, why don't you get into Alcoholics Anonymous? It's harder to fall out. And I said, what does that mean? I thought he was throwing algebra at me or something, like that's the advanced class. But he said, what that means is go up to the secretary. His name is John. Tell him I sent you. Tell him you're sober 3 days and you want a job in this meeting. And I listened to him. I was desperate for sobriety when I got here. Absolutely desperate for sobriety when I got here. And I went up to him and I said, that guy, Jim, told me to come up. My name's Ron. I'm sober 3 days. And he told me to get a job, whatever that is. And John looked at me and he says, you are in luck. We promoted somebody tonight and we need a new ashtray putter-outer. And my first job in Alcoholics Anonymous at 3 days of sobriety was to get there early, put the ashtrays out at the end of the meeting, clean them up and stack them for the next meeting. And I've been in service to Alcoholics Anonymous from that day to this day. So if you're new, get a job in the meeting. Congratulations, Lisa, and anybody else that's relatively new that got a job in the meeting. It's a lot harder to fall out. So anyway, as far as the traditions are concerned, I started to take a look at the history. And I found out some things that I was unaware of. I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not. But there were actually 4 groups that were started before Alcoholics Anonymous ever came into being that helped tons of alcoholics. And not one of them had traditions, and every one of them folded. The first one was started in 1796 by a signer on the Declaration of Independence. His name was Dr. Rush. And he formed a group to help alcoholics of that time. No traditions, they folded. In the 1840s, I think it was in 1840, there were 6 drunks sitting around in Baltimore at a tavern called Chase Tavern. And they were in trouble with their drinking. And one guy looked at the next. He said, God, my wife's throwing me out because of the drinking. Another guy said, I'm getting fired because of my drinking. And one looked at the other and he said, you know what? Maybe I could help you to stop drinking if you could help me. And the other 4 said, God, we got all kinds of problems because of booze. Maybe we could all help each other. Now, that sounds pretty similar to Alcoholics Anonymous, doesn't it? And they started. One alcoholic helping another. They named the group the Washingtonians after George Washington. 4 years after that, so 1844, they started in 1840. By 1844, depending on what book you read of the Washingtonians, they had a minimum of 100,000 members. The most I've read is 400,000 members. So they had somewhere well over 100,000 members at 4 years. Now, if you read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill writes in 1939, and again, we started in 1935. Bill wrote in 1939, we are a group of 100 men and women. And this is one of the things, as I got more into the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, made me really like Bill, because I understand this and how many people we got here? 74 people. I got a feeling I'm not the only one that's going to understand this logic. When Bill wrote, we're a group of 100 men and women, we really had only 78 after 4 years. But Bill knew 100 sounded better than 78. So that's the reason that the big book says 100. And when I heard that, I just went, wow, I like that guy, Bill Wilson. I know how to exaggerate things, So, but that was group 2. Again, no traditions. Our 3rd tradition, our 5th tradition, and our 10th tradition started because of the Washingtonians. One other thing with the Washingtonians, to show how much they had grown in comparison to Alcoholics Anonymous, Abraham Lincoln was one of their speakers at one of their first conferences. I mean, think about that. They're in existence 4 years, and they get a guy that became president of the United States to be their speaker. We weren't even close. We had 78 guys and women struggling. But no traditions. What mistakes did they make? What did we learn from them? Well, number one was they decided that, you know what, we can help alcoholics. Why not help everybody with every addiction? So you no longer needed to be an alcoholic to be a member of the Washingtonians. That's why we have the 3rd tradition and the 5th tradition. And I'll get into those as I talk about the traditions. Second thing they did is they got involved in outside issues, which is why we have the 10th tradition. They believed they had some political clout, and they did, same as AA could have today with millions and millions of members. The 2 biggest political things going on in the 1840s was, one was slavery, and 2, they had the temperance movement then, the wet-dry controversy. So they got involved in those 2 things. The Washingtonians folded after 8 years. No traditions. 1900, you had an Episcopal minister by the name of Elwood Wooster, who started a group to help alcoholics. Again, no traditions. Again, they folded. 1920, Frank Bookman started the Oxford groups, which most, if not all, almost all of the early members came through the Oxford group. So our earliest meetings were in the Oxford groups. But again, no traditions. Alcoholics Anonymous started in 1935. Bill and Dr. Bob started writing the traditions in 1946. The reason they started writing the traditions was very simple. As quick as groups started, they folded because we didn't have any traditions. And they said, we need to come up with some guidelines, not rules, but guidelines that maybe we can follow so we don't kill each other and kill off Alcoholics Anonymous. So that's why we started the traditions. I don't have time to go through all the traditions. I know that, and I'm not going to, but I want to talk about at least some of them, okay? And we'll start with tradition 1. And tradition 1 says, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends on AA unity. And I'll just show you a very good pamphlet to learn the traditions, is the 12 Traditions Illustrated. I like this. They have some really good information, in my opinion. And one of the things they talk about is, it says, our brother, the noisy drunk, affords the simplest illustration of this tradition. If he insists on disrupting the meeting, we invite him to leave and bring him back when he's in better shape to hear the message. We are putting the common welfare first, but it is his welfare too. If he's ever going to get sober, the group must go on functioning. Very simple example. But now this is just my opinion. In fact, anything I say, and I always say this at every talk, anything I say is just my opinion. I am not here as an instructor or anything like that. I am just a member of Alcoholics Anonymous sharing my experience in this program. If your viewpoint of whatever traditions I'm going to be talking about is different than mine, if your thoughts of what alcoholism is different than mine, the steps, whatever it is, I am not here saying my way is right and yours is wrong. If you're getting good results with what you're doing, keep doing it. I'm just here to share my experience and that maybe it will help you. So he goes on to say, yet that is only one rare aspect of the problem. When we do get sober in AA, we shed a few small bits of the big ego. We admit I can't handle alcohol and I can't stay away from it on my own. Fine so far. But there's plenty of that big ego still with us or still with me. It may lead us into taking other members' inventories. Anybody ever do that? You don't have to raise your hand. Oh, wait a minute. Let me change my view here. There we go. Get tired of looking at me. Okay. I learned this tradition really, really well with about 5 years of sobriety. I was at a meeting, and in my early sobriety, I used to curse a lot at meetings. I never thought anything of it. I thought that's what that's the way I talk. Okay. I come from New York. I've lived on the streets. I mean, it's just the way I talk. So I'm at a meeting with my sponsor. His name was Bob. It was a mixed meeting like this one is. I get called on in the meeting and I dropped a bunch of F-bombs. And now, I don't know if any of you guys do this when you're sitting at a meeting with your sponsor, but I used to do it all the time. I get done with my talk, and then I lovingly look at my sponsor like, wasn't that the greatest thing you've ever heard in your life? And he didn't say yes. He just put his arm on my shoulder. He said, come with me. I want to talk to you. Middle of the meeting, it takes me outside. He said to me, Ron, he said, there are women at this meeting. He said, why don't you watch your toilet bowl mouth? I said, what do you mean, Bob? That's the way I talk. You've been my sponsor a while. You know that. He said, Ron, our common welfare must come first. That means you put other people in front of you. Personal recovery depends on the unity of that group. Did you see that one older lady that raised her hand as having 2 days of sobriety? I said, yeah. He said, how do you know? From the way she's dressed, she might have just been an at-home drinker, and you just turned her off to Alcoholics Anonymous because of your toilet bowl mouth. Why don't you learn to watch it? Why don't you start to put other people first? Put the group first. Think of the unity of the group. And I went, wow. I had never, that was 41 years ago. Now I saw Jean B just got on this group. I've known Jean since she came in, which is a long time ago. We used to be members of the same home group. I've talked for her current home group and her husband's home group. She will tell you, I've known her, I don't know, 20, 30 years. I don't think you've ever heard me curse in a meeting because I watch it. I watch it. Our common welfare must come first. A few months later, we had a guy in our group. He was sober 26 years. Bob was over to my house. His name was Wally. I said, hey, Bob, because I just heard this like the day before. I said, hey, Bob, you know what I heard? He said, what? He said, Wally got drunk. Now he's 26 years sober. I'm 4, right? 5, somewhere in there. He said, yeah, I know that. He's been drunk about 3 weeks. Now, I used to see Bob several times a week. I said, why didn't you tell me? He said, Ron, you're sober, whatever, 5 years. Would that help your sobriety or hurt your sobriety if I start gossiping about a guy with 26 years that got drunk? He said, you put the common welfare first. You stop gossiping. A couple of others on this. One I see a lot, at least in the area I'm sober in. I see people come into meetings with their pets. They think, oh, that's my dog. He's the cutest dog in the world. Never thinking there's maybe somebody at the meeting that's allergic to a dog or afraid of dogs or other animals, whatever they are. I've seen people, now that's different with a service animal. But what I've seen in my area is people that don't have a service animal, but they put the thing on it that says service animal. I just think we have to watch our own behavior and put the common welfare first. I believe without a doubt, this is the most broken tradition in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was sober over 40 years. This is probably about 5 years ago. I was at a meeting. After the meeting, a friend of mine, Jim, came up to me, and now I'm older, okay? I have problems, unless I go to the bathroom before the meeting, I have problems sitting for an hour or an hour and a half without wanting to go to the bathroom. And my friend Jim comes up to me after the meeting. And like I said, I'm sober a long time at that point, and I'm trying. I'm really trying to work this tradition. And Jim says to me, he says, Ron, he says, do you realize, he said, you're pretty well known in Alcoholics Anonymous, especially in our area. When you get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of somebody's talk or after somebody gets done, what you're saying to the next person is you don't matter. Us old timers, we don't need to listen to you. Now it's time to go to the bathroom. And I went, wow, I had never thought about that. So it was a learning period for me. Jean and her husband, Greg, may have been at this meeting. What used to be my home group, once a month, we had a traditions meeting. Lady Emily would chat it one night, Emily R., and she said something I had never thought about. But as far as this tradition and also the 10th tradition, she said people that wear clothing to Alcoholics Anonymous, and let's say it says vote for Trump or vote for Biden, we're showing an outside issue. It was a learning thing. So to me, this whole thing is a learning thing. The idea of trying to apply this tradition in my home life. I told you I was sober a long, long time. I heard this couple do it. I called up at the end of that conference. I called up my friend Kent, who was the founder of the conference, and I said, "I've never heard that before." I said, "Could you take me through how to apply the traditions and the concepts in my home life?" He said, "Sure." So we started on tradition 1. He said, tradition 1 says our common welfare must come first. Personal recovery depends on AA unity. So if that's true, Ron, he said, what does your marriage and what does your family mean to you? And how do you put them first? Now, I had never thought about that. And I gave him some answer. I'll never forget this. I gave him some answer, and he said, yeah, right, sure. He said, why don't you sit down for a couple of days and write down really from inside, what does your marriage really mean to you? What does your wife really mean to you? What do your kids and grandkids really mean to you? And are you a unifying member of that relationship, or are you trying to get your own way? Now, that opened a can of worms I had never thought about. I don't know about you guys. I was great in my marriage as long as Ann did it my way. I knew best. I bring home the bacon. You need to do it the way I want. Let the kids behave, and now everything's good. So I started to look at it differently. Do I really put them first? If so, am I a unifying member of that? What am I willing to sacrifice for my family, for my relationship? As I said, am I unifying? When I talk to my wife, we're both retired. We're together a lot. Anybody else do this? You ever give your spouse or significant other the silent treatment and expect them to read your mind? Am I the only one here that has the look? You know how to give them the look like you did something wrong again? Never looked at that as a tradition issue. I never looked at the traditions as something that could help me to grow and feel good about myself. See, the purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous, I heard people say, I'm coming back when you asked for newcomers. We have a program that works in Alcoholics Anonymous, but a lot of times we don't talk about the disease of alcoholism. Disease of alcoholism, as far as I'm concerned, is very simple. If I take a drink, I cannot guarantee you I'm not going to get drunk, get in trouble, lose jobs, lose families. Just my life will become an absolute mess because I have an allergy, as they called it in the early days, to alcohol. But here's the kicker. When I don't drink, when I stop drinking, if I look deep inside me, whether I'm coming to Alcoholics Anonymous or not, if I'm not doing the steps, if I'm not trying to grow spiritually, inside me where I really live, because I know how to be the copycat. I know how to go to a meeting and listen to some old timer with a good program and copy what he or her says. So I sound good in meetings. But where I really live, I know my insides don't match my outsides. I know I'm uncomfortable. I know I'm fighting fights in my head all the time. I'm the guy that gets into a fight with somebody in the car that's not even there. You know, I have angst inside of me. And what makes me an alcoholic is a couple of drinks take all those feelings away. So I got a problem I can't fix. But through applying these steps and then the traditions and the concepts in my life, I get comfortable inside myself and I don't have to pick up a drink. I don't have to pick up a drink. You know, I made up an analogy years and years ago. If you ever hear a speaker say it, I originated it. And what it is, if this was a live meeting and Tamara invited me to your group and a mosquito comes down in the middle of my talk and bites me in the arm and a mosquito bite comes up and it just itches like crazy. And Tamara looks at me and she says, Ron, please don't scratch it. We had a speaker here about 3 weeks ago. That mosquito came down and bit him on the arm. We had to rush him to the hospital and they amputated his arm. And Jean comes up to me. She says, Ron, I've been to this meeting. Same thing happened. We had a woman speaker here 2 weeks ago. Same thing. Mosquito bites her on the arm. They amputate it. I go home. My wife sees that mosquito bite. Her eyes get as big as saucers. She gets a look of fright in her face like you wouldn't believe. She says, you don't scratch that. Last time you scratched it, you lost your job. You got my car repossessed. Then you got my refrigerator repossessed. Don't scratch it. Go back to another meeting tomorrow and they'll tell you not to scratch the mosquito bite some more. That's called meeting-based sobriety. You don't go years and years and years with meeting-based sobriety because the mosquito bite's going to keep itching and eventually you're going to go like this. Through an application of the steps, traditions, and concepts, anybody, man or woman, makes no difference, finds a way to live comfortably inside themselves so we don't have to pick up a drink. Tradition 3 says, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. I learned that tradition really well with 2 months of sobriety, maybe 3 months of sobriety. I guess it was about 2. I got asked to chair a meeting, first meeting I had ever spoken at. And all you have to do in the area I got sober in is tell your story for about 10 minutes and then just call on people. But I was nervous and I didn't know what to do. So I told my little story, get done with it. And I start calling on people. Well, that morning in the Los Angeles Times, there was a headline. There was a place called the Rand Commission, who in 1976 wrote that they had found a way for alcoholics to drink normally. So I start calling on people, and I called on this one woman. And she had the newspaper article with her, and she said, look, we can drink. There's a bar right across the street. She said, I got some money. I'll buy the first round. Let's go down. We're wasting our time here. Now, I'm 2 months sober. I don't know what to do. I just let her go on. She finishes after a few minutes. I called on somebody else. The person said, I don't know, a couple of sentences, and she broke right in. We can drink. Look what the Rand Commission is saying. Let's not waste our time at this stupid meeting. Let's go get drunk. Again, I don't know what to do. That person finishes. I call on the third one. She does the same thing. And thank God for old timers. One of the old timers looked at her, and I don't remember her name, but whatever it was. He said, ma'am, he said, this is a closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The only requirement for membership at a closed meeting is a desire to stop drinking. He said, do you have a desire to stop drinking? She said, no way. Look at the article. Let's go get drunk. He said, then you have to leave. See, we think that this is at least I thought that this was a tradition to exclude people from Alcoholics Anonymous. Like you can't be an alcoholic and an overeater, or an alcoholic and an addict, or an alcoholic and a sex addict, or whatever it is. You can be an alcoholic and in anything. This is an inclusive tradition. But you have to have a desire to stop drinking. There was an article about, 10 years ago or so in the Grapevine at a meeting I used to go to in Chatsworth, California. And a guy that wrote it was a younger guy that got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. He went to AA and NA, and he became secretary of this meeting. And he invited one of his friends from NA to chair the meeting. Guy had no alcohol problem whatsoever. He was a heroin addict. And he got up in the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he gave his drug log and so on and so forth. And the end of the meeting happened, and people are cleaning up the meeting. And there was an old man, probably my age, but there was an old man that was helping to clean up. And this guy had raised his hand as being, new in Alcoholics Anonymous, first 30 days. So the secretary went up to him to be friendly. He said, what'd you think of the meeting? And he said, well, to be honest with you, he said, I'm an alcoholic. He said, I'm going to have to find something else, because he said, my problem is alcohol. I don't know what jonesing is, and I don't understand shooting up and all of this other stuff. He said, so I'll go find another way to get sober. And I don't know if the guy talked him into staying or he didn't. But what the guy said in his article in the Grapevine is that he changed his methods. That when he was in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, he talked about his alcohol problem. You could be an alcoholic and in anything. In fact, there's very few people, myself included, that are just pure alcoholics. Okay. I think probably hardly any of us. But if I'm in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I talk about my alcohol and I talk about alcoholism. I don't talk about the other stuff. Why? Because if I talk about the other stuff, maybe, I don't know, three of the other problems I've had in my life are gambling, overwork, make finance and being successful my end all and be all. Eating too much food, love chocolate chip cookies. Love chocolate chip cookies. I mean, to show you what an obsession that is in my life, I've got a medical thing going on. And my wife told me when they do this surgery, she says, you're going to lose 20 pounds. I said, wow, that's pretty good. So then we're talking and she says, such and such a supermarket has a sale on both chocolate chip cookies and this cake that I like. And she said, why don't you go over and buy one of them? They're like half off and, you're going to lose 20 pounds anyway. I thought, great idea. I bought both. Now, so I've had a problem with food. I've had a problem in a lot of areas. If I start talking about that, not everybody's going to relate to it. I remember doing a talk years ago in Florida, and afterwards, a bunch of us went out for some coffee, and they were telling me in that area of Florida, it's not like people call on you, you raise your hand to be called on, and they didn't have any OA meetings in that area in the afternoon. And they had a bunch of people from Overeaters Anonymous. Good program. But they had a bunch of people from Overeaters Anonymous that would show up at their Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And they'd raise their hand and they'd start talking about eating chocolate cake or whatever it was. And if you bring a newcomer to a meeting and that man or woman is puking and just trying to get sober, they don't need to hear somebody talking about chocolate cake. So we have the third tradition. As I said, the Washingtonians folded because they didn't have a third tradition. How would I look at this in my home life? Okay. And this is just the way I look at it. If it helps you, great. Okay. The only requirement to have a relationship with me is that you want to. Now that's interesting because until I learned this, I got a feeling again, I am not the only one here that sometimes can charge a price to be in a relationship with me. I've got to take that price off. Wife, kids, grandkids, makes no difference, okay? Even friends. If you want a relationship, do whatever it is you want, okay? I'm not putting a price tag on this. If my wife says the wrong thing, if dinner's late, if whatever it is wrong, now all of a sudden there's a price to pay. Let me tell you something. That doesn't work. And it took me a lot of growing up to learn to take that price off. Let's go to Tradition 5. Tradition 5 says each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. Again, the word alcoholic goes with Tradition 3, goes with how the Washingtonians started to get away from that. One primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. Now, I learned a great lesson with this, or two lessons really with this. First one was a number of years ago when I first moved up to the area I lived in. I started a meeting with, I don't remember, we had 1, 2, or 3, so anywhere from 5 to 15 guys a week. We would meet on Friday nights and go to some meeting somewhere. And the word I'm going to try to emphasize here is the word its message. Because for years before this happened, I thought it said the message. Okay. Each group has but one primary purpose: to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. That's not what it says. It says its message So was one Friday night. We have about 3 carloads of guys or so about 15 guys. And we go to this meeting. To this day, that was the absolute worst meeting I've ever been to. It was. People throwing spitballs at each other. I talked about the first tradition. Every other word is F this, F that. Somebody would be talking and somebody else would just throw a spitball at him or something and say, shut the F up. It's my turn to talk now. They'd start talking. And we're just like looking at each other like, whoa, this is like we're wasting an hour here. Let's leave and let's go to a good AA meeting. And this one guy caught us doing that. You know, he saw the looks between the guys. And he said, I see what you guys are doing. He said, don't you make fun of my group. He said, let me tell you something. He said, I went to your AA for almost 3 years and I could never stay sober. And I came here and I found a home and I'm sober for 2 years. So don't you make fun of my group. And I started to learn. It wasn't shortly after that. I'm at another meeting and the chairperson was talking and I didn't like what she was saying. I just didn't. And what I'll do at a meeting, if chairperson is going or it's a speaker meeting and I don't like what they're saying or don't relate to it or whatever, I'll stare at the steps or I'll stare at the traditions and just think about them. And I stared at the 5th tradition and I saw that word it's. Not the message. Each group has a different message. I love your group here. I really do. I love the message. A lot of the people you get to speak are people that I've known for a long time and have a lot of respect for. I love the service, etc. But that's your group. It's the kind of group that would fit for me and you guys. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. The people that are here for the first time, I hope you're like, this is a great group. And it's not too often somebody goes through the traditions. The rest will be on steps and stories and all of that stuff. But each group carries its message. When I spoke to my friend Kent about how would I apply this at home, this was a big one. This was a big one for myself and for my wife. He said to me, you know, the tradition says each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. He said, Ron, what is the primary purpose of your marriage? He said, don't give me a flippant answer. He said, think about it. You ever think about that? What is the primary purpose of whoever it is you're with? What is the reason you're there? Is there a primary purpose? Okay. I thought about it. My wife, who just opened the door, when I asked her about it, and she's not a member of a 12-step program. It took me at least a week or two to come up with an answer I was satisfied with, and she came up with her own answer that she's satisfied with. Okay, and I can tell you what mine is. Okay, it's very simple. The primary purpose of my marriage, and I'm married over 52 years to the same woman. Dragged her through the drinking years. We have the best relationship of any 2 people I know. Totally love her with all my heart. She puts up with me, and we got something good. And same with my kids. But what is the primary purpose? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's for her to know she's loved. It's for her to know I have her back. It's for me to take care of her. It's for me to be there for her. And because I'm such an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous, the other part of it has to do with you guys. And what that is to let you know that you can have a good marriage and a good relationship long-term through trying to apply the steps, the traditions, and the concepts in your married life and really, really be deeply in love with the person. So that's my primary purpose. You know, when I look at some of the questions that I might ask myself as far as this tradition is concerned, okay, The biggest one is this, okay? And it comes out of the big book. And it says, my problems are of my own making. It says, I'm willing to admit, this is out of the big book when they talk about the disease of alcoholism. It says, I'm willing to admit I'm somewhat at fault, but I know you're more to blame. You ever do this in a relationship? Well, the reason I'm treating you the way I'm treating you is look what you did. So the big question that I ask myself in my relationship with my wife, with my kids, etc., when my head starts talking to me about what they're doing wrong, is my problems of my own making. They arise out of my own selfish behavior of me wanting whatever it is that I want. So that's how I look at that tradition. I'm going to jump to tradition 10. Tradition 10 says, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues. Hence, the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. Well, I mentioned the Washingtonians and them getting involved in the political issues of that time. Folding, because it causes divisiveness. The other thing to consider with this tradition, again, is clothing. What do I wear to a meeting? Do I wear anything to a meeting that, like a vote for this person or anything along that line, that the newcomer may come in and say, oh, my viewpoint is different. My viewpoint is different. Could be a turnoff to them. Alcoholics Anonymous is a turn on, not a turn off. So I have to watch this, and I have to watch it closely. I learned this tradition early in sobriety. I went to a meeting on a Friday night, and when it was raining, I mean, it wasn't rain, it was pouring out. I mean, absolutely pouring. By the time I got from my car into the meeting hall, which was in a church that night, by the time I got there, which was not a very far walk, I'm drenched. I mean, water just cut, one of those just downpour type things. And I get on the coffee line and I get behind some lady. And when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had hair down to here. I had a long beard. I was dirty. I was not the kind of person you wanted to be friends with. That's all I can tell you. Anyway, I get behind this lady and I'm trying to be friendly because I was not the most friendly guy in the world. I mean, I told you about my first job was ashtray putter-outer. A few months later, they noticed that I don't say hello to anybody. All I do is glare at you. So they made me greeter of the meeting. I was not the most friendly person in the world when I got here. So I get behind this woman, and now I was greeter by that time, and I'm trying to be nice to people. So she's in coffee line in front of me, and I tap her on the shoulder, and I go, God, is it raining out? And water's coming off me, right? She thought I was trying to pick her up. So she turns around, and she gives me this look, like looking down her nose, if looks could kill. And she said, we have no opinion on outside issues here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And she turns away from me. I'll never forget that. That was my first idea as far as this tradition is concerned. I mentioned this girl, Emily, with the clothes. Another thing with this tradition to consider, and I see this a lot of times we'll adhere to this tradition at the meeting, not realizing that if I'm in a meeting hall or if I'm on Zoom is very big today. I hope it stays forever. I think it's the greatest thing in the world. I really do. There's people here from all over the world. You couldn't have that in my little group in Rockland, that's for sure. A friend of mine, John, is going in for surgery tomorrow. He will be unable to get to a meeting for a while. He can get to a Zoom meeting. So I think it's the greatest thing in the world. But the thing I've learned about this tradition is if I get into a conversation with Jean's husband, Greg, before a meeting, and we start talking about politics or anything else, That's the same as in a meeting, because you might have somebody sitting there. So I watch what I say before the meeting and after the meeting. Now, if Greg and I go out for lunch after a meeting, we both have opinions. We're both intelligent or fairly intelligent people. Yeah, that's fine. But I watch what I say in a meeting, before the meeting, and after the meeting. I mentioned the Washingtonians. How would I apply this at home? Very, very simple. Ann and I, just as an example, politically, we don't see it the same way. Now, we will discuss it at dinner, et cetera. This afternoon, we have some neighbors coming over, okay? We will not get into a discussion of anything like that with other people, because we don't do it as a unit. We don't do it as a unit, okay? The other thing with this tradition is, I don't, if I'm in a fight with my wife, okay, because no relationship is just perfect, but I am not going to come into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and knock her. And she's not going to do that to me. As I said, we've been married a long, long time. I have never publicly embarrassed her or anything else. And she's never done the same thing to me. It's an important part of our relationship. It's a very, very important part of our relationship. Can I let Ann disagree with me? Because as I said, just politically and in many, many other ways, we don't see life the same way. Raising our kids, raising our grandkids. There's one. And she's the greatest mom I ever met in my life. But I see raising the kids maybe a little bit differently than she does, or our grandkids, okay? Can I let her do what she wants to do without taking her inventory, without suddenly going back to tradition 3, making her pay a price to be in a relationship with me? I never thought about these stuff. I was sober, like I said, somewhere 35, 40 years when I started to look at this. Why? Because this man, Bob, that got a hold of me at 4 years, said something to me that turned me around. My whole message in Alcoholics Anonymous, further growth. He said, I'm going to take you through the steps and show you not how to work them, but how to apply them in your life. But then you need to go through them again and again and again and again, trying to get more out of them every single time you work them. I think it would be an absolute shame if I worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous at 46 years the same way I worked them at 40 years. And I didn't have a bad program at 40 years, but I have to keep growing. I have to go further. And that's not only with the steps. How do I take the tradition further? Am I really willing to watch myself? Talking about this tradition, am I really willing to watch myself, or do I start taking my wife's inventory? Do I start thinking my way's the right way? Because I don't know about you guys, but if you guys have ever heard me do something on step 10, I found something out about me, and I think it's true for almost all of us, if not all of us. And what that is I don't live out there. I've learned to clean up my behaviors. You know where I live and you know where I get in trouble? Up here. Up here. That's where I say, she's wrong. I better let her know it. What if I'm really willing to apply this? What if it's one thing to sit here in a meeting or read a book or listen to a speaker tape, but what if I'm really willing to do it? What if I'm willing to watch my behaviors? And let me also say this. Step 10 says something that I missed for years, because I thought what step 10 said is we continue to watch for these things. It says selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. What I thought it said for years is if I'm working the program wrong, if I didn't do enough prayer and meditation in the morning, if I didn't go to the right meeting, have the right sponsor, write the right inventory, try hard enough, then these things will happen, so I better work my program better. That's not what it says. It says continue to watch for these things when they crop up. When they crop up. What that means to me is if I watch my thoughts as far as this tradition is concerned, and all of a sudden Ann or one of my kids or one of you guys or anybody else does something and I see my thoughts get off, am I willing to correct it? But I'm the one that has to watch it. It doesn't mean I'm not working the program right. It just means I'm a human being. It means I'm a human being. And so anyway, that's what I think of this tradition. I got about 5 minutes left. Let's talk about Tradition 11 real quick. And I love talking about Tradition 11 and how it came into place. It says our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. The start of this tradition is just amazing to me because we all have egos and we all want to, the heck with this anonymity idea. You know, why not let me get on television and tell them how AA works, you know, that kind of thing. Well, the start of this tradition, because we had no traditions from 1935 through 1946, zero. And then they were voted in 1950. Well, in the early 40s, and this is how this tradition started, in the early 40s, the best pitcher in professional baseball was a guy named Bob Feller. And Bob Feller was a pitcher for the Cleveland Indians. Absolutely the best pitcher in baseball. And he had a catcher for the Cleveland Indians by the name of Rollie Hemsley. Rollie Hemsley was an alcoholic. But early in his career, Rollie Hemsley was an all-star baseball player, made the all-star team every year, batting over 300, no errors or very few errors. I mean, he was a great, great ball player. But just like it says on page 30 of our big book, over any considerable period, it gets worse, never better. He went from a 300 hitter to a 250 hitter to a 200 hitter to a 150. He's drunk in the clubhouse. He's making errors. He's just terrible. And his manager is trying to sober him up, and nothing's working. And then they hear of Dr. Bob, because he's in Cleveland. And Dr. Bob and Sister Ignatia are in Akron, not far away, and they're helping alcoholics. And he tries to get Rollie Hemsley to go to the hospital to sober up, and Hemsley refuses to do it. I just love this story. And Hemsley refuses to do it. So what the manager did at one of the games, he went to the opposing manager and he convinced the manager and the pitcher that day for the opposing teams. He said, when Hemsley gets up to bat, he said, I want you to hit him with a fastball. And they said, why? He said, I got my reasons. Just hit him with a fastball. That's exactly what happened. Boom, and Hemsley goes down. The trainers, the manager comes running out. Rollie, lay there. They broke something. We need to get you to the hospital. There was nothing wrong with him. But they put him on a stretcher and they took him to Dr. Bob's hospital, and he sobered up. Now, all of a sudden, it's late the following year, and he's back batting 300. He's not making any errors, and he's doing great. And the writers start talking to him. And he says, it's because of this thing, Alcoholics Anonymous. Greatest thing in the world. He said, I sobered up. Look how great I'm doing. Things are fantastic in my life. And this is all over the newspapers nationwide. Well, Bill Wilson starts reading this stuff. And he says, wait a minute. I am the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. What is this kind of... Hemsley's in the paper? I should be in the paper. He starts breaking his anonymity. Other people start breaking their anonymity, one after another after another. And they saw the problem with that. I saw the problem up close and personal over about a month period. One Sunday morning, we got up. We were living in Northridge, California, and there was an article about a very famous movie and TV star that had sobered up, and he got a year of sobriety, and it had his name right in the Los Angeles Times, and he's sober a year, and blah, 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 blah. About a month later, there is a picture of this guy dead drunk, running down Reseda Boulevard naked, dead drunk. And that's the reason for the 11th tradition, is we all have feet of clay. We all have feet of clay. So we don't break our anonymity at the level of press, radio, film, and in today's world, social media. How would this apply at home? Interesting question. How do you apply this at home? Real simple. We don't take cheap shots at each other. That's probably the biggest thing I can say. Thank you guys for listening. I hope I tried to make the traditions as interesting as possible and give you something to think about. I hope I accomplished that. Thanks, everybody. Tamara, thanks again for asking me.